The rancher's hands stopped mid-motion when she spoke those words, her voice barely above a whisper in the darkness of the barn. He'd been wrapping rope around a fence post, ordinary work on an ordinary night, until she appeared from the shadows like a ghost. The young Apache woman stood in the doorway, silhouetted against the moonlight, holding something wrapped in cloth that she wouldn't let him see. "Don't leave marks," she repeated, her eyes darting toward the main house where lamplight still burned. "They're watching everything you do, every bruise, every cut, every sign of struggle. They'll use it against both of us." Daniel Copper had lived alone on his small ranch in the New Mexico territory for 3 years, ever since his wife died of fever. He knew every sound his property made at night, every creak of wood and rustle of wind. But he hadn't heard this woman approach, and that scared him more than her cryptic warning. She was young, maybe 19 or 20, with long black hair braided with strips of red cloth, wearing a mix of Apache and settler clothing that suggested she moved between both worlds. "Who's watching?" he asked, keeping his voice low to match hers. "And who are you?" "My name is Kaya. I work at the trading post in town. You've seen me there." She was right. He had seen her translating between Apache traders and white merchants, always quiet, always careful. 3 days ago, a man came through. He said his name was Marshal Hendricks, showed a badge, asked questions about you. But he's not a marshal. I've seen real marshals. This one's eyes are wrong, and he keeps his gun hand too ready. Daniel felt cold spread through his chest. "What kind of questions?" "About your land, about whether you have family, about how isolated you are out here." Kaya stepped further into the barn, and now he could see her face clearly in the lantern light. There was a bruise along her jaw, fresh and dark. He's been asking the same questions about 3 other ranches in the valley. Small operations, men living alone, property worth taking. 2 weeks ago, one of those ranchers, Marcus Webb, was found dead in his home. They said it was Apache raiders, but Marcus was kind to my people. We had no reason to kill him. "And you think this fake marshal—" "I think he's marking targets." Kaya unwrapped the cloth she was carrying, revealing a leather ledger. "I stole this from his saddlebag while he was drinking at the saloon. Look." Daniel took the ledger, flipping through pages of names, property descriptions, and disturbingly detailed notes. His own name was there, with notations about his daily routines, the value of his cattle, the fact that he had no close neighbors. Webb's name was crossed out in red ink with a single word beside it: complete. "There are 4 names not crossed out yet," Kaya said quietly. "Yours is next on the list. He's coming tomorrow night. I heard him tell his partner, a man he calls Carson, that your place would be easy. No witnesses, no family to ask questions. They'll make it look like an Apache attack, take your land deed, and sell your property to the railroad surveyors who've been buying up the valley." Daniel's mind raced through possibilities, each one darker than the last. "I should ride to town, get the real sheriff. The sheriff is in Santa Fe for a territorial meeting. Won't be back for a week. That's why they're moving now." Kaya's hands twisted the cloth nervously. "And if you show up in town with accusations against a man wearing a badge, who do you think they'll believe? The white rancher who lives alone and might be going mad from isolation, or the marshal with proper credentials and a smooth story?" She was right, and he knew it. The frontier ran on appearances and assumptions. A man with a badge carried authority even if the badge was stolen. "So what do you suggest?" "Don't leave marks," she said again, and this time the meaning was clearer. "When they come, when they try to kill you and stage it as a raid, you can't leave evidence of a fair fight. No bullet holes in walls where you shot back, no signs you knew they were coming. You need to disappear before they arrive, but make it look like you're still here. Then, when they enter, you turn their own plan against them." Daniel studied her face, seeing the calculation behind her eyes. "You've thought about this a lot." "I've watched men like Hendricks my whole life. White men who see my people as convenient scapegoats for their crimes. Men who think an Apache woman at a trading post is too stupid to understand what she's overhearing." Her voice carried quiet fury. "I'm tired of watching good people die while bad people profit, and I'm tired of my people being blamed for murders we didn't commit." They spent the next hour planning in whispered voices. Kaya knew details that surprised him: the layout of his property, which windows offered the best sightlines, where the shadows fell deepest. She'd been watching his ranch for days, she admitted, trying to decide if he was worth saving or just another white settler who'd shrug at injustice. "What made you decide to warn me?" Daniel asked. "Last spring, when the drought was bad, you left water barrels at the edge of your property. You didn't make a show of it or tell anyone. But my uncle's family was traveling through, dying of thirst. Those barrels saved 3 children." She met his eyes. "A man who does kindness quietly is worth more than 100 who do it loudly. That's what my grandmother taught me." Daniel barely remembered leaving those barrels. It had seemed like common sense. Water was life in the desert, and leaving it for travelers, Apache or otherwise, cost him nothing. Now that small act was saving his life in return. The plan they devised was dangerous and required perfect timing. Daniel would prepare his house to look occupied, lanterns burning, his silhouette visible through windows, but he'd actually be hiding in the root cellar beneath the barn, which had a concealed entrance Kaya had spotted during her surveillance. When Hendricks and Carson entered the house expecting an easy murder, they'd find it empty. But by then, Daniel would have locked the doors from the outside and started a small, controlled fire. If you're listening to this story and wondering how a man and a woman who just met could trust each other enough to plan something this risky, make sure you subscribe to this channel. We share stories about the real West, where survival often meant making instant judgments about character, and drop a comment telling us what city or country you're watching from. We love knowing our community of Western story enthusiasts spans the globe. The next day passed with excruciating slowness. Daniel went through his normal routines, feeding cattle, mending fence, doing everything exactly as he always did. But his mind was constantly calculating angles and timing. He'd moved weapons to strategic positions, filled buckets with water for the fire, and created a dummy in his bed that would cast a convincing shadow against the window shade. Kaya returned at dusk, moving through the sagebrush like smoke. She brought rope treated with animal fat that would burn slowly, and a mixture of herbs that would create thick, choking smoke without much flame. "When they're trapped inside," she explained, "they'll have a choice: burn or come out with their hands visible and empty. Either way, you'll have them." "What about you?" Daniel asked. "When this is over, they'll know someone warned me. They might suspect. Let them suspect." "I'm leaving tonight, heading north to the reservation where my mother's people live. The trading post owner treats me fairly, but he can't protect me from men like Hendricks." She paused. "Though if your plan works, there won't be anyone left to threaten me." They waited as darkness fell. Daniel lit lanterns in the house, positioned his dummy, and moved clothing around to create shadows suggesting activity. Then he slipped into the root cellar beneath the barn, with Kaya pulling the concealed door shut behind him. The space was small and musty, lined with preserved foods and tools, with narrow gaps between the floorboards that let him hear and see fragments of what happened above. Kaya remained in the barn loft, hidden in hay, serving as his eyes and early warning. They'd arranged a system of signals, specific bird calls that would tell him when the men arrived, how many there were, which direction they approached from. The wait was torturous. Daniel's legs cramped in the confined space. His mind conjured worst-case scenarios. What if they'd changed their plans? What if Kaya had misjudged their timeline? What if there were more men than expected? But he forced himself to stay still and patient, breathing slowly, listening. The bird call came just after midnight, a canyon wren's descending trill that meant 2 riders approaching from the east. Daniel heard hoofbeats, then voices trying to be quiet, but still carrying in the desert night. "Lights are still on. Old fool's awake." That was a gravelly voice Daniel didn't recognize, probably Carson. Better. Means we won't have to wake him up to enjoy the show. That smoother voice would be Hendricks, the fake marshal. Remember, make it messy. Apache raids don't leave things neat. Use the tomahawk, Carson, not your knife, and scatter the beadwork we bought from that trader in Tucson. Daniel's hands clenched. They'd planned every detail, down to planting false evidence. How many other murders had they committed this way? How many families had grieved while believing lies about Apache violence? He heard them approach the house, their footsteps crunching on gravel. A door creaked. They were entering through the back, as Kaya had predicted. For several minutes, silence. Then shouting, confused and angry. "He's not here! Check everywhere. He was just... The lanterns are still warm. It's a trap. We need to..." That's when Daniel heard Kaya drop from the loft, moving fast. The barn door slammed shut, and he heard the bar fall into place on the outside. Then came the sound of someone running to the house, and seconds later, another door slamming. The men were locked inside. Daniel climbed from the cellar, moving quickly now. Kaya was already at the house, securing the front door with a heavy timber. Through the window he could see Hendricks and Carson inside, starting to realize their situation. "What's happening? Let us out!" Hendricks's smooth voice had turned panicked. Daniel approached the window where they could see him. "I think there's been a mistake, Marshal. See, I heard there was going to be an Apache raid tonight. So I prepared. And look at that. I caught 2 raiders trying to murder me in my sleep. Strange, though, they don't look Apache. They look like white men with fake badges and blood money in their pockets." Hendricks's face twisted with rage. "You can't prove anything. Let us out now, or you'll what? Kill me like you killed Marcus Webb, like you plan to kill me and blame it on people who did nothing wrong." Daniel held up the stolen ledger. "Funny thing about keeping detailed records of your crimes. Makes them real easy to prove." Carson pulled his gun, aiming at Daniel through the window. But before he could fire, smoke began seeping up through the floorboards. Kaya's slow-burning rope, positioned to create maximum confusion without actually destroying the house. Within seconds, the interior filled with thick, acrid smoke. "You're insane!" Hendricks was coughing now, stumbling. "You'll kill us!" "No," Daniel said calmly. "You'll kill yourselves if you stay in there, or you can come out the front door with your hands empty and high. Your choice. You've got about 2 minutes before that smoke gets thick enough to choke you unconscious." He watched them struggle with the decision, saw them try the windows and find them barred from outside, saw them realize they were truly trapped. Finally, as the smoke grew unbearable, Hendricks staggered to the front door. "We're coming out. Don't shoot." Kaya removed the timber, and Daniel stood ready with his rifle as the 2 men stumbled onto the porch, coughing and gasping, their weapons left behind in the smoke. Kaya was already binding their hands with rope, moving with practiced efficiency. "Please," Hendricks wheezed, his smooth demeanor completely shattered. "We can make a deal. The railroad's paying good money for this land. We can split it. No one has to know." "Everyone's going to know," Daniel interrupted. "Because come morning, we're riding to town together. You're going to tell the real sheriff exactly what you did, show him this ledger, and confess to Marcus Webb's murder. And if you're thinking about making up stories or trying to shift blame, remember, I didn't leave marks. No bruises, no torture. Nothing but the evidence of your own crimes. You'll hang fair and legal." Carson spat blood. "No one will believe an Indian's testimony. That's what she is, isn't she? The one who warned you. They'll never convict us based on her word." "They won't need her word." Daniel pulled out another item Kaya had given him, a letter, officially sealed. "This is from the Territorial Governor's office. Turns out, real marshals keep records of their badges, serial numbers and all. The badge you're wearing was reported stolen from a murdered lawman in Kansas 6 months ago. That alone is enough to hang you. The murder confession will just speed things up." The fight drained from both men. They slumped in their bonds, realizing how completely their plan had collapsed. As the smoke cleared from the house, Daniel and Kaya stood together in the aftermath, watching their prisoners sit defeated in the dirt. "You were right," he told her, "about not leaving marks, about the plan, about everything." "I was right about you too," she replied, "about you being worth saving." She glanced toward the horizon where dawn was beginning to break. "I should go. When you ride into town, it's better if I'm not there, less complicated. You could stay, as a witness. Hell, you could stay and work here if the trading post isn't safe." Daniel surprised himself with the offer, but it felt right somehow. Kaya smiled, the first real smile he'd seen from her. "Maybe I'll come back, after the dust settles and these men are judged. But for now, I need to see my family, tell them what happened. They need to know that not every white man in this valley is an enemy, and that sometimes justice actually works." She paused. "Besides, there are other names in that ledger. Other men these two were planning to kill. Someone needs to warn them." Daniel understood. "You're going to do this again, aren't you? Watching, warning, stopping these predators before they can kill." "Someone has to. The law moves slow, and it doesn't always protect the right people." She untied her horse from the barn. "But now I know it can work when good people act quickly. That's worth knowing." She rode off as the sun rose, and Daniel never saw her again. But over the next months, strange things happened in the territory. 3 more land fraud schemes collapsed before they could turn murderous. A gang planning to rob a supply train and blame it on Apache raiders found themselves surrounded by real cavalry the moment they made their move. A corrupt Indian agent who'd been selling reservation supplies for profit suddenly disappeared, his account books mysteriously delivered to the territorial office. People whispered about an Apache ghost woman who moved through the territory like wind, seeing everything, intervening in ways that seemed almost supernatural. But Daniel knew better. She wasn't a ghost. She was just a smart woman who'd learned to use her invisibility as a weapon, who understood that sometimes the best way to fight injustice was to expose it before it could hide. Hendricks and Carson hanged together in Santa Fe after a quick trial where the evidence against them was overwhelming. The ledger revealed 4 completed murders and plans for 6 more. Daniel's testimony, combined with the stolen badge and the fake marshal's own meticulous records, left no room for doubt. Some of the railroad investors who'd been buying the murdered rancher's land faced prosecution too, though most escaped with just financial losses and ruined reputations. Marcus Webb's widow received compensation from the territorial government and the railroad company. The other ranchers on Hendricks's list learned how close they'd come to death. Daniel Copper became something of a reluctant hero, though he always insisted he'd only survived because someone else had seen the danger first. His ranch stayed small and remote, exactly as he preferred it. But he made changes based on what Kaya had taught him. He left water barrels more regularly. He learned basic Apache phrases. When traders came through, he treated them fairly regardless of their heritage. And he kept a low profile, understanding now that invisibility could be its own form of power. Years later, when he was older and the territory had become a state, a young Apache woman came to his door. She was perhaps 16, well dressed in a mixture of traditional and modern clothing, carrying books under her arm. "My mother asked me to bring you this," she said, handing him a beaded leather belt, intricately made with patterns that told a story in symbols he couldn't read. "Your mother?" Daniel asked, though he already knew. "Kaya. She said you'd remember. She also said to tell you the water barrels saved 3 children in 1878, and the warning saved 1 rancher in 1881, and that Rancher's Fairness probably saved a dozen Apache families over the years. She said those actions ripple out like stones in water, touching lives you'll never know about." The girl smiled. "She wanted you to have this belt because it tells the story of the night you didn't leave marks. In our tradition, such stories are important to remember and pass down." "Is she—" Daniel wasn't sure how to ask. "She's well. She married a good man, has 3 children now. She still travels sometimes, still watches out for people who need warning. But she wanted you to know that the work you've done here, treating people with dignity, it matters more than catching murderers. That's the real victory, building a place where fewer murderers need catching." Daniel accepted the belt with gratitude, though he felt uncomfortable with the praise. "Tell your mother I've only done what any decent person should do." "That's exactly what she said you'd say." The girl laughed. "But she also said most people never do what they should, so doing it anyway makes you rare. She said you're proof that one person acting with courage and kindness can shift the balance of things, even if only a little." She left as quietly as she'd come, and Daniel hung the belt where he could see it daily. In the leather's patterns, though he couldn't read them as language, he could feel the story. A story about choices made in darkness, about trust formed instantly between strangers, about justice that came not from violence, but from exposure of truth. The belt reminded him that every action, no matter how small, carried weight. The water barrels he'd left without thinking had saved children. Those children had grown, had their own children, contributed to their community. And because he'd treated one young woman with respect and believed her warning, several men still lived who would have died. Several families remained intact that would have been shattered. He thought often about Kaya's words that first night. "Don't leave marks." At the time, she'd meant it tactically. Don't give your enemies evidence they can use against you. But over the years, Daniel understood it more deeply. The marks that mattered weren't the bruises and scars of conflict. They were the invisible marks left by kindness and justice and fairness, marks that rippled through time and lives in ways you'd never fully see. Some nights, when coyotes sang in the hills and the desert wind whispered through sagebrush, Daniel would stand on his porch and look out at the vast darkness. He'd think about a young Apache woman who'd risked everything to save a stranger, who'd moved through the territory like a guardian shadow, correcting injustices before they could calcify into tragedy. He wondered how many other people were out there doing the same work, watching, warning, protecting, never seeking credit or recognition. He wondered how many quiet acts of courage happened every day, invisible to history, but shifting the world nonetheless. And sometimes, just sometimes, he thought he heard a canyon wren's call in the distance, that descending trill that had once meant danger approaching, but now meant something else entirely. It meant someone was watching. It meant the balance was being maintained. It meant that even in a hard land full of hard people, there were those who chose to act with wisdom and mercy. Daniel Copper lived to be 73, dying peacefully in his sleep in the ranch house he never left. When they found him, he was wearing the beaded belt, and in his hand was a small leather journal where he'd written his own story. The truth of that night in 1881, when an Apache woman saved his life by teaching him not to leave marks. His journal eventually made its way to the territorial archives, where historians would later discover it and marvel at this first-hand account of frontier justice. But the story within those pages wasn't really about justice or danger or clever plans. It was about a simpler truth that Daniel had learned that night and never forgotten, that kindness given freely creates debts that can never be repaid, only passed forward to others who need it. And in passing it forward, in treating every person with the dignity Kaya had shown him, he'd left his own marks on the world, invisible, enduring, rippling out through time in ways he'd never fully know but could always trust were there, shaping the future one small act at a time.